I am Dr. Clare Craig. I'm a qualified medical doctor and I specialise in pathology. And since 2020, I have been looking at data around COVID issues, and I've been co-chairing the Heart Group, who are a multidisciplinary professional body, all of whom have had concerns about COVID policies. And over the last 2 years, I've been trying to get some data out of the government regarding vaccinations and deaths. So the government was releasing data through the ONS on deaths by vaccination status. And the data was starting to look, first of all, a bit concerning in terms of mortality in the vaccinated. And second of all, more and more there was more and more missing elements to it. It no longer correlated with how many deaths there actually were in total. So it's starting to look like they were messing around with it a bit, and we weren't being shown the whole picture. And then they stopped publishing it altogether. And so this was happening at a time when excess deaths were too high, and they were too high in vaccinated countries across the world. And so, this was hugely concerning. It was also happening at a time when we could show vaccinated people were more likely to catch COVID. And were dying more from COVID than the unvaccinated. And we also knew why that was. There's biological reasons why that was, because of the third dose of the vaccines causing the immune system to respond differently. So instead of treating it like a pathogen that needs to be attacked, the immune system was switching to treating it like a food or a pollen that can be ignored. So there's plenty of reasons to be concerned about deaths in the vaccinated.
The year that was the most concerned, would you say 2021 when this pattern started to emerge? Would you?
So the thing with 2021 is that there was an awful lot going on. So, there were lockdowns and there were the deaths that were associated with lockdowns. There was I think there probably were some viral COVID deaths as well in there. And there's this problem with vaccination in that in the first 2 weeks after a vaccine, people end up with immune suppression. They end up with other viral infections and they have a higher risk of COVID infections. So the people who were most likely to the people who were going to get it in that wave had those infections earlier. So all of that is kind of difficult to unpick. But if we sort of take a step back and say, well, let's just look at 2022. Come 2022, the virus is sort of different story. It's a cold, it's upper airways, it's not causing the problems that were being caused before. And there's no lockdowns, and that the whole picture was very different. So by 2022, you shouldn't be seeing any kind of mortality problem. In fact, you should be seeing the opposite, because you've had a mortality problem, which means that people, they can only die once. So people who should have been dying in 2022 died already. There should have been a deficit. We had an excess.
So you would say 2022 is when we really had sort of significant excess deaths that pointed to potentially the vaccine, the COVID vaccines.
Right. So, the reason I'm saying this is not based on UK data. There's data from other countries that have very clearly shown that the vaccinated were dying too much, particularly after 2022. That's when the discrepancy gets the biggest. And there's just been a paper out actually a week ago, the Royal Society of Open Science, on Germany, and which is fascinating because the rates of vaccination in different regions of Germany were hugely different. So it's very easy to do that comparison. And what they did is they say, well, what was it like? What was the difference in mortality in 2020 between these regions? And there were big differences because of all sorts of factors. And then say, well, how did that change over time? So that they sort of act as their own control group, because you say, well, this region that was vaccinated, they weren't dying much in 2020, and now they're dying too much in 2022. And this other region that's not got many vaccinated people in it was dying quite a lot in 2020, but they're not dying anymore. So, you can see the difference there very clearly. So I actually think there's plenty of evidence that the vaccines have caused people to die. That's not really what this is about. This is about why can't we see the data on that?
We're definitely going to be talking about that and your legal case that led to the tribunal's decision just last month. So going back to the ONS though, because you said, just to highlight, so in 2023 they stopped publishing weekly data by death by vaccination status, correct?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea? Would you like to give your opinion on why do you think they stopped doing that?
Well, so their claim was that they'd sort of finished. We've done this
Oh, I
project,
see.
it's all done. We've
So,
sort of proven everything we need to prove. We can stop doing that. I don't think that's the case. I particularly don't think that's the case because around the same time, the ONS decided to change how they measure excess deaths.
yes, which is
So
very important, isn't it?
yeah. So the thing with excess deaths is you have to have some kind of idea of how many deaths are expected before you can say whether there are too many or not.
So that's called the
Um,
baseline, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a baseline, and the baseline changes with seasons. You have more expected deaths in the winter than you do in the summer. And so there's a certain amount of, you can either take a very simple baseline or you can do a complicated one. And they'd always done quite a simple one in the past, which makes it very transparent. Anybody could repeat what they'd done. But in 2023, they came up with an incredibly complex model. And the model double counted things. So they would say, well, let's look at the trend at a regional level, and we'll extrapolate that trend of increased mortality, and let's look at the trend by each age group, and we'll extrapolate that and add that on top. And so once you start adding trends, you're
Yes.
actually double counting.
And consequence of that would be an increased baseline,
Yeah,
increasing
which is
those.
what we got. We got a massive baseline. I mean, actually comical, right? It wasn't a little bit off. It was massively, massively off, to the extent that they predict every week more deaths than were happening in 2020. They're saying we should have had this many deaths, and really, ever since they changed that baseline, there's been far, far fewer deaths every single week than they said is
Right.
expected.
So can one argue potentially they have hidden the excess deaths by raising that baseline? You're not seeing the obvious excess deaths, and just by recalculating everything.
I would say that is unquestionably what happened. And what's more, the model that they created, which was clearly ridiculous, was imposed on every government body in the UK.
Right.
So prior to that, there were certain groups within public health who were analysing the data in different ways. And you could sort of, compare them, and you could say, well, look, they're seeing it in this way and you're seeing it that way. That was over. It was all going to be the ONS model. And that happened at the same time as in other countries, the baselines were all being hiked. So there
Wow.
was, it wasn't just here.
So other countries were following suit. That's very
Yes.
interesting. Okay. Any particular countries, Claire, that stand out to you that know we're changing the baseline?
So I know Australia,
Right.
their baseline got raised. I think the Netherlands did.
Netherlands. Yeah.
Yeah, those I'm certain of.
Yeah.
I don't know how many others
Yeah.
there may be.
Okay, so now fast forwarding to your Freedom of Information Act requests for the anonymized, I mean, you were asking always for anonymized data. You can speak obviously into that. Yeah, Claire, tell me, was it sort of, I mean, 2022, early 2023, when you started to write to the HSA, the Health Security Agency?
Yeah, it was January 23, and I very specifically thought, well, I'm not going to pursue the ONS, because up until then I had been doing occasional FOIs,
Yeah.
and I'd always had real difficulty getting help from the ONS. But actually, our public health authority, the UK Health Security Agency, had been really helpful. So
Okay.
I thought, well, look, let's just try them, because
Yeah.
they actually own the vaccination database. So they have, who is vaccinated in the UK. And in order to keep that vaccination database up to date, they have to remove people from it when they die. So that means they must also have death data. And I actually thought they might be getting the death data from the ONS, but it turns out they don't. They go straight to source. They get it from the General Records Office. So they had the data we needed.
Okay.
So yeah, I approached them in January 2023, and I asked, as you said, for anonymized data. I'm not interested
Yeah.
in trying to find out about individuals. This is
Yes.
about a population problem.
Yes.
And besides which, I understand the kind of rules around these things.
Yeah.
There's laws, but there's also sort of rules, and there's etiquette as well.
Yes.
So what I asked for was the date of vaccination, and the date of death, but not the actual dates. So what they can do is randomly anonymize them by adding and subtracting a few days here and there to each of them.
See, so you were giving like a little range for them to put the
Yes,
information.
that's right.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly that. And then also I said only over 20-year-olds,
Right.
because if we looked at children, because so few were vaccinated and so few thankfully die, it becomes easier to see potential individuals within the data. So I was like, well, only over 20-year-olds and in 10-year age brackets, which is what they use in their publications. So the most kind of if you're looking at people who are 90, there's going to be lots of deaths every week of people who've been vaccinated, and there's no way you're going to be able to find who's who. If you look in the 20 to 29-year-old age group, then every week there's 20 to 30 deaths in total. But if you looked like at a particular date, say right back at the beginning of 2021, then there might only be one death of somebody vaccinated in that week. But the point is, you can only identify that person from the 20 or 30 deaths if you already know they're vaccinated. So if you already know they are vaccinated, you haven't learned anything at all. You don't even know when they were vaccinated because the date's randomized. So there's nothing to learn from this data. There's nothing to disclose. There's nothing that can be disclosed, because literally that's all I asked. I didn't ask for anything else. I didn't ask for cause of death or anything else.
Yes. And there's no names, there's no date of births, there's no anything like that. Right. Okay. So now you've done a sort of series of these requests now to HSA, to the Health Security Agency. What is their response to you?
So they said no straight away, and their first excuse was that this randomizing the dates was the creation of new data, which under FOI legislation they're not obliged to do. And so I appealed that to the Information Commissioner's officer and got through to this lovely case worker who was really helpful. And he said, well, I don't think they're right. I think you've got every right to ask for this data. I think that I can share case law with you that shows that this type of randomization is not the creation of new data. It's been through the House of Lords. It's been decided that doesn't count.
Okay.
So I went back with that, thinking that would be the end. And UKHSA then sort of pivoted and came up with other excuses, which I then took back to the nice caseworker guy who said, look, I think you should start again, because the way I'd worded it was a little bit ambiguous. He said, let's just start again with a clear slate. And with this, you've done that sort of groundwork, and we'll go from there. So I did that. All of this
around August now 2023, right?
I know. So we've lost 8 months already. And then went through the process again. At this point, the UKHSA was much more, scared. They were much more kind of putting up many more excuses about why they couldn't release the data. And again, I went to the ICO, and this time they were not on our side anymore. And they were coming up with a variety of different reasons. It was like a kind of lucky dip of reasons not to disclose information that they were giving us for not being able to pursue it. And none of them...
Sorry, carry on.
Well, none of them seemed reasonable to us. Like, none of them, to the extent that we thought we're going to take this further, because, they're blocking this without... It's not fair what they're saying. So we did a crowdfunder and raised £8,000, which got us a lawyer, which meant we could go to tribunal. And at that point, our case was combined with the Us for Them case.
Yes, right. Had they asked for exactly the same data, right, Claire?
I think they may have asked it for in a slightly different way. So they were asking for public disclosure of the data that had been released to the pharmaceutical companies. They know who died and when,
Yes.
why shouldn't the public know?
Right.
That just
Okay.
seems
So
wrong.
it overlapped quite well in a way with
Yeah.
your case. And so your case is merged to one case. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
one tribunal.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. One tribunal. Right. Okay. Can you tell me, so obviously you kindly gave me permission to publish the tribunal's decision, the 27-page report. And there, I mean, I noticed quite a few anomalies that stood out to me. But firstly, you were not allowed to go to this the hearing on the 24th of June, I think it was, of this year. Do you know why you were not allowed to attend that hearing?
Um, I did attend a hearing, the hearing.
You attended,
Yeah,
yeah,
the final hearing.
but there was
And
one before, and even
yeah,
you're not allowed to attend, that you were,
I just can't
it
quite
was a
remember.
closed, because it was a closed hearing, and you were not invited, you were not allowed to attend, which I thought was very strange.
Yeah, I
Uh,
remember my lawyer at the time saying that was going to be okay, and he was there, I think.
right, okay,
So I was like, that's on you. And I
okay,
had a good lawyer. I trusted him.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and
okay,
a lot of the whole tribunal was very much a legal game.
of course, yeah, yes,
I was just all sort of
I,
spectating and
yeah,
thinking, I need to
I
ask about this and that. Yeah.
understand. Yeah. So you the main hearing was I mean, I know the decision was the 14th of October. Was that also the main hearing date?
No, the hearing had been some time before that. It must have
Okay.
been
Okay.
September, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there was also a bundle you were not allowed to see, a closed bundle, and they gave you gists of what
Yeah. So I
went
think,
on in the hearing that you were not allowed to go to.
right.
That's what
I
I
know.
read
So
in the
to you and
decision.
me, this seems slightly
I
odd,
find that
like
slightly strange.
secret
Yes.
courts, right? But
Yeah.
the lawyers were not fazed by this. This is normal
Okay.
procedure in freedom
Okay.
of information cases because
Okay.
there's a sort of a process by which the judge can be shown everything in order to fully understand the risks of disclosing it to the public. I think that's probably fair enough in some ways, but the problem is that um, all of that conversation is had behind closed doors in such a way that our lawyers can't complain about how it's being argued. So,
Yeah.
you'd think that it should be a parallel thing.
Transparent,
Yeah, whereby even if we can't know the details, it's not about the details, it's about the principles. We weren't allowed to argue the principles about what was being said. So we don't know if the judge was being told, if you give this spreadsheet out and you know the age of every person in every row, then you can match it to these newspaper reports. And we didn't get the chance to say, well, hang on, we were asking for 10-year age groups, for
yes,
example, to
yes,
say that wouldn't be the case. We just don't know what was said to
yeah,
persuade the judge. We just know he came out thinking that this data would reveal all about who was vaccinated and who died.
yeah.
I mean,
That's
the ironic thing, of course, I'm not trying to reveal all, but the ironic thing, of course, is that in 2021, vaccine status was everybody's business and you couldn't move without telling people what your status was.
yes.
And now suddenly in death, it's the most private information that needs to be heavily
Yes,
guarded.
I mean, you raise a very good point there, Claire. What irony is that? So going back to this decision, this written decision, these well, I'm calling them excuses, these reasons they gave you, and what I noticed is that the legal grounds that they used changed quite a bit. They started off with, oh, it's gonna the data privacy, they're using that exemption, we can't have these people be somehow identified, right? Then they sort of backed away from that a bit and they went purely for health and safety reasons, this all-encompassing broad reasoning going on there, which I found very, very strange. And could we talk a little bit about that? What they used as their
Yeah.
excuse for not releasing the data, essentially.
Right. So there's some clause in the legislation that says that if the data could cause physical or mental harm to people, then that's a reason not to reveal it. Of course, it's not going to cause anyone physical harm. So they came up with this argument about mental distress, saying that what could happen is some anti-vaxxers can, those horrible people could get hold of the data, this spreadsheet, and from this spreadsheet, they could find out something. They don't say what, because you can't, that could cause them to go knocking on somebody's door to harass the bereaved relatives and cause them mental distress. I mean, honestly, the number of leaps of imagination and of illogical reasoning to get there is extraordinary.
I'm sorry. I mean, I read that and I was just, it's so shocking. And another thing was that it could fuel anti-vaccine campaigns that incite threats or violence against doctors, scientists, or public health staff. And I mean, it's just, and the whole misinformation, they love to use that it could be used as a tool for misinformation, misinterpretation, and it could damage the public confidence in these institutions. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that, that the reverse is true, isn't it? The fact that they are not being open and transparent and British about this is what's damaging confidence. They're not acting in a principled way. They're coming up with these poor excuses. And it's in stark contrast to other places. So, for instance, in the Czech Republic, the entire data, in way more detail than we were asking for, has been in the public domain for some time and been analysed and has shown issues with people dying too much after being vaccinated, and nobody has been hurt by that.
It's I mean, what do you think about them calling you vexatious? They use the reason that you're a vexatious, one of the reasonings, I think this is section section 4, because you were repeatedly requesting this information. Are you vexatious, Claire?
No, I requested it twice on the advice of the Information Commissioner's Officer. There's nothing that's another sort of, as I was saying, they've got these kind of things they can push back on, and it was literally like they just tried them all. Let's just throw all of them at her.
Yes. I mean, that's what I did write about, that they literally threw everything, the whole kitchen sink, and to see what would stick. I mean, so were you aware of the judge's decision there and then on that day, or was it a written judgment and you found out weeks later?
Oh, I think it was written later. So on the day of the tribunal ended with us being allowed to submit. Actually, it wasn't us, it was more the other side. We're allowed to submit a bit of extra information.
Well, that's not fair. So hang on.
Well, I mean, it was agreed with everybody. As I said, I didn't understand all the legal stuff. I did understand that we weren't going to be allowed loads more court time, and therefore this was a sort of compromise to make things work. There could be a further submission with everyone's consent, and everyone consented. So there was a bit of a lag between the tribunal and the judgment, and then when the judgment did come out, it's quite long. There's quite a lot to absorb in there. I did, and then it was half term, and then I did a video describing what went on, and then us for them managed to get media attention on it. So I'm so grateful for them that they managed to, and for Camilla Turner, that she's
got this Telegraph article that has raised this shined a spotlight on this. And I mean to me, it's the HSA coming across in a very bad light with this. It just seems like a deliberate data blackout.
I mean, the really odd thing was that in the courtroom, albeit Zoom, which is what it was, I don't think that the UKHSA was represented at all. And the person who was doing all the speaking as if they were UKHSA was from the ONS. So there's this, this guy from the ONS. He's called Vahe Nafalian, and he and I have corresponded and have met and have we've had sort of dealings. I met him in the High Court when we were doing the judicial review for the decision to vaccinate primary school children in the UK.
Wow.
And as part of that court case, we were saying, look what happened when you vaccinated the teenagers. Look how much they died. And the UNS said, yes, that is a statistically significant increase in deaths in that age group, but we're not going to share you any details for the court.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? I mean,
yeah. And what was really odd was, I can totally believe that behind closed doors, government institutions talk to each other, and sometimes in a way where they perhaps shouldn't. I think sometimes some of the boundaries between one institution and another can get blurry. I'm not sure I'm even that bothered if they do get a bit blurry, but they shouldn't be in a court setting. So the UKHSA was meant to be who we were dealing with, and in their own submission, they said they'd involved the MHRA and the ONS, neither of whom have anything to do with this case.
Yeah, it was almost like they're hiding behind other departments. It's sort of like pushing other departments forward. And yeah, I mean, it really is. It's just, yeah. I mean,
so the other, sorry.
I would say it's a miscarriage of justice that has gone on here. The public deserve to know. There needs to be transparency. They're worried about the misinformation and all of this fueling, whatever. It's like they are creating it themselves, because if you've got nothing to hide, show the data. They obviously have plenty to hide, and that's why they're doing this.
Well, that's certainly what this looks like, isn't it? Like, I just don't see how they can't see what this does. A lack of transparency just causes suspicion, and it's a stupid thing to do on their part. I really think they made a massive error there.
Yeah.
And just to sort of say what else is odd about this case. So, having said it is a mental distress argument, they then, when they do these legal cases, they'll often say, well, we think it's this, and then they'll say, and if it isn't this, it's this, sort of to back it up, so that they and the sort of backup one was that they would have to employ somebody to go through every line of the spreadsheet and then search all of the news reports on the internet to see if that was a person that could be identified.
Oh my God.
And that would take 76 years and therefore wasn't feasible to do.
That sounds like what the FDA would.
I know.
Ring a bell.
I know.
But the FDA said it would take if they had to disclose all the Pfizer documents, it would take about 76 years. My goodness.
Yeah, I know. And also, I mean, the fact that actually from the clinical trial, that the number of documents that do have to be looked through is enormous. And like 75 years, if you're going to do it properly, think, how can it take you 75 years to look through all the clinical trial documents before you know what they say? Yeah. And how long did you have before you agreed?
Before you greenlit them? Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, this could never have taken 76 years. It's not necessary anyway, because all of it's anonymous. So there was that. And then the last point is something that I'm taking legal advice on at the moment, which is that we had a witness statement as part of our submission. So we had this witness statement from psychologist Christian Buckland, Dr. Christian Buckland.
Yes.
And we asked his opinion on the mental distress question.
Yes.
Right. So he wrote his professional opinion, and he was very balanced in his opinion, actually. Yes. And he was talking about, how distress works, and how sometimes on an individual level, you have to be careful about timing in terms of sort of being gentle with people. You don't just tell them horrible news straight away. So there's this sort of, when you're dealing with an individual, you might want to release things in a gentle, careful way. But, if you're looking at data and populations and that kind of thing, then the truth is a great healer. And that, that all the evidence from psychology is that honesty and openness and transparency and truth are the things that prevent mental distress and prevent all of the harm. Because, because that's people, there's a thing about truth, isn't there, that is healing.
Yes.
And so that was his statement.
What happened? Were you...
So it was not submissible. I don't know why, but it wasn't allowed in the bundle, which meant we couldn't refer to it when we were trying to make the case.
And that's your argument against their excuse of using it's going to cause mental distress, mental harm, PTSD, whatever. Wow. And they refused. They who made that ultimate? So the judge would have made that decision of not including it in the bundle.
That's right.
Did he give a reason why?
Oh, probably. I mean, I can't remember it. I don't think it was a necessarily very good reason why I can't remember it. I'm sorry.
No, that's
Um, but
that's
then in the judgment, the judge has used this statement and quoted from it um, to say the opposite of what Christian meant. So it's a little bit like the Trump video. He's sort of taken a bit of the statement here and then
okay.
taken another bit 50 minutes later and put them
Right.
together to say that it's distressing if you release data, which is not at all
Okay.
what the sentiment of
So
that
he's
statement
sort of
was.
spliced the. So he's read this statement that wasn't allowed to go into the bundle, but the judge, because really what I remember, I mean, if anything that goes into the bundle is what the judge reads. So if something's out of the bundle, the judge doesn't read it. That's my,
I
I
would have
could be
thought so
wrong.
too.
Okay, so judges managed to read this as Christian Buckland's statement, who's a is a psychiatrist or a psychologist?
He's a psychotherapist. He was
Psychotherapist.
president of the College of Psychotherapy.
Yes,
He's a
right.
senior psychotherapist.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And he's taken his statement and just cherry picked a few things and put them together to
Mm,
so has completely sort of turned around, misinterpreted the
yeah.
statement in a way. Uh,
Yeah.
that's really, really alarming.
I know. And it's just as if there's not enough going on with this case to
Yeah.
have that happen as well.
Yes, yes. I will include that, what this point you've made in my article as well, because I think that's
Yeah.
really important.
So as I said,
Um,
I'm not a lawyer and I'm talking to the lawyers about that particular point to see whether,
is that tampering? Okay, so that is tampering with the evidence in a
it
way.
seems like that to me.
Oh, Claire. I mean, I do want to commend you on your tenacity of going so far with this, right? Because I think everybody else be like, oh, I'm just going to give up. You're then ignoring me. Do I really need to now raise money to get, I mean, you really did the whole, you went for it. How do you feel now, on a personal level of where do I go now? I've got the door shut in my face. They're not releasing this data. What's your what are your next steps, Claire?
So I've kind of I don't have a plan for how to get through to people in power except through people in general, right? And I think what we've seen over the last 5 years is that the kinds of conversations that we've been having, albeit shut out of mainstream media, have had an impact. We've
Yeah,
seen people not vaccinate their children in this country the way they did in other countries. We've seen people refusing to roll up their sleeves, even when they can't articulate why they don't want it anymore. So the things we've done have had an impact, I
yeah,
think.
yes,
And so I want people to just understand there's a problem with people dying
yeah,
after the vaccines. And I've been saying it for years. I think people have subconsciously absorbed it. I want them to consciously absorb it. And I think they have. So if you look at the comments from that Telegraph article, 1,500 comments, and all of them with the same concerns. There's like one or two people that are still defending the vaccines.
yeah,
Everyone else is sort of waking up to it. So I think that actually the fact that this case has been covered in the press is probably more of a result
yeah,
than if we'd had the data. And I just, I really genuinely, I just think that what we need is this conversation has to be had. It has
yeah,
to be had. It can't still be shut down. And, I was very frustrated over the last 5 years with a situation where people were still scared and then you couldn't engage with them in any kind of rational way because they had emotional takeover. So
yeah,
you couldn't actually communicate any of the problems, and we sort of waited and waited and waited. And there are still some people who are scared. I met some last night at a debate. They still exist, but there's far fewer of them. So there's many, many more people who've come out of that period of fear and then gone through the period of sort of denial, and they're ready to start listening, I think. And
yeah.
I just hope that we're now at that turning point where people will listen.